Hi, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. I'm Dara Frimmer. I am now the senior rabbi of Temple Isaiah, but when I started there 18 years ago, I was just the assistant, and I really loved that job.
Rabbi Shapiro is home. I would remind her of the
How great.
Depending on how she's.
You can take my seat. Anyway, it's an honor to be here, and just a little bit about me. I did grow up in a conservative shul in New Jersey, and when I eventually thought about becoming a rabbi, I had lived through a wonderful 4 years at Stanford University and understood progressive liberal Judaism, West Coast Judaism for the first time, which I was amazed by. I spent a little time in Israel, a little time at Harvard Divinity School, and through various influences, including some great Reform rabbis, I eventually chose the Reform movement. But I think part of what I love about the invitation from Beth, so thank you, is just the idea that we as Jews don't spend nearly enough time with each other. It's sort of like we find our building, we stay in our brick and mortar, and we in fact forget how wonderful it is to learn together, to pray together. So it really is a delight to be here. In the wake of celebrating the 9th of Av this past week, I've had a lot on my mind, both because of the Jewish calendar, but also because of the state of the world post October 7th, the state of sort of the heightened polarization and hate speech as we anticipate the election in November, and in general, the very fragile state of American Jewish life and Jewish community. For many years now, it feels that we have been living through a chapter of incredible anti-Semitism, and in that vulnerability, it's not just once a year that we think, is it all coming to an end? Is this sort of the final chapter of our great story, and these external threats that are seemingly insurmountable? What do we do? How do we prepare? What do we do as a response? And so what I wanted to do today, and that's why I named the shir, the world is about to end, now what? Is one, just to acknowledge in Jewish time and history and in practice, we oftentimes sit in this space where we wonder, is this it? And yet, I would point out, we're still here. So we're doing something that helps us move through these places of existential fear. And I wanted to look today at one particular midrash, focusing on Adam, and I'm sure it's familiar to you, the first night that he and Eve ever experienced. But really the bigger context is wondering if what our tradition has taught us and continues to teach us about our resources and tools that we need to sort of hold on to even more these days that will help us endure periodic moments of fear, maybe even very highly particularistic ones about things that are happening in our families or in our communities where we feel like a dream that we had is crashing, or a plan that we had set seems to be dissolving, and some of the more national concerns we have. The future of our beloved homeland. What happens after this next election? Big questions that Americans are asking about. Is there any sense of a fabric that holds us all together? So let's take a look, if you will, at, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the Hebrew translation, but an English version of this midrash from Avodah Zarah. Would someone like to read it? I know it's very small print. I apologize. I did not also look at my own glasses. Thank you, please.
Sat down to fast and to weep throughout the night while Eve wept beside him. But when the dawn began slowly rising like a column, he said, "Such is the way of nature," and then proceeded to offer up a bullock.
Yeah, a cow. So, okay, familiar to people? Have you seen this before? A little bit, yes? So why does Adam think the world is ending? What evidence does he have? It's getting dark. And clearly God forgot to give him the note that said, this is normal, this is the way of the universe. Also, this midrash only refers to it sort of, if you know, you know, but why would Adam assume that the darkness and the end of the world was his fault?
The whole story with the apple and the snake.
That's right. So the midrash jumps in assuming, or maybe proposing the question of how is he reflecting on what may have been a deep sense of guilt? He just ate from the fruit. He understands maybe already that the garden is no longer his. And in that state, he sees the evidence before him, darkness, which he has never experienced. Without any other information, he assumes this is my fault. And the world is coming to an end, or it's going back to tohu vavohu, total chaos. And what are his reactions? And eventually Eve's reaction as well. What does he choose to do in that moment? Yeah, well, that's only after the sun comes up. So before that, when he actually thinks the world is ending, he fasts, which is fascinating, right? That's a great rabbinic interpolation of already in the garden, they understood fasting was a very Jewish response. He prays. What other words would you use? What else is he doing? He cries, right? We just read through Eicha, Lamentations, right? He laments. He uses his words. And there's one other thing he does that I at least can identify. He has Eve. So Eve cries with him, laments with him ostensibly. So it's only the two of them, but there's community in that moment. And the last thing I would just say that seems obvious is he endures. This is sort of like the hidden piece. He gets through the night and is able to see that the sun rises. All of those are very specific coping mechanisms. And then, as you said, once he realizes, I misdiagnosed the problem, I misread the signs. I thought, and it was true in the moment. How could it not be true? He felt that he was going to die and the world was over. Then he offers a sacrifice of gratitude. And I think that's equally as important to remember. Both how do we recognize and confront those moments where we're certain it's over, but then what do we do immediately after we realize, oh, it's not? And that's why I love this Elie Wiesel quote, which is right underneath it. God gave Adam a secret, and that secret was not how to begin, but how to begin again. So I want to suggest sometimes one of our greatest coping mechanisms of how we deal with moments of uncertainty is if we can remember the last time we felt uncertain and that we made it through, we endured with community, with prayer, with feasting, or fasting rather. Feasting comes after. That in that moment of gratitude and articulation, we concretize that moment in our memory. And we try to say, it didn't end. I got another chance. We got another chance. And so next time, could we remember that story and hold on to it to help us endure through that dark night? Yeah. Nope. Okay. Reaching. Perfect. Okay. So question. When you think about moments in your own life in the last year or at any point in your life, when you as a Jew have thought about, I think this world is coming to an end. I feel like this community that I've created is coming to an end, these moments of fear, maybe it's something that your grandparents or great-grandparents told you. What was your reaction in that moment? What did you rely on, or what was the tool that you used to endure? Because clearly you're here. Yeah.
The Shiva process.
Okay. So a life came to an end, and what did Shiva do in order for you to be able to pick up the pieces?
Community of people to support.
Great. Great. Ritual and connection and community. Exactly. And also food. Let's not forget. Good. Other ways that as Jews you have made it through moments where you thought all is lost. We have different ages in the room, but
October 7th.
October 7th.
I got on Facebook right away.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to remove at least a third of the folks who think a little differently than I do.
Yeah.
They want to do that.
Yeah. So sometimes our response when the message is it's all over is actually to bunker down or bunker up rather and limit our world perhaps so that what reassures us are the people and the messages who align with what we hope will be true despite the evidence that is being presented. So for example, how many people feel that hope, the word hope, is a light, naive, Pollyannish articulation resource that people use at a time of fear? How many people would say they're more over here with hope is a weapon? Hope is a tool that you use deliberately with focus and energy in order to reimagine. Where do you fall out on the use of hope? Matt's pointing over here.
Yeah, I'm with Matt over there.
Yeah, is it, yeah, agree?
Yeah.
And it's okay to be over here, because maybe we just need a different word with those sort of the platitudes and the truisms that often come, oh, it'll be fine. They're better off wherever they are now. We have a lot of reason why we hate false optimism. But one of the things I want to also say, and if you turn to the very bottom where it says Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory, is that one of, I think, our most helpful ancient and modern customs of confronting as Jews moments where we feel like we have broken and I'm not sure we're going to be able to rebuild is by employing hope. But I think Rabbi Sacks says it beautifully. Does anyone want to read? I know it's so tiny, the print. I apologize. Thank you. Yes.
What has happened is a failure to understand the difference between optimism and hope. They sound similar, but they are quite different. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the belief that if we work hard enough, we can make things better. Between them lies all the difference in the world. Optimism is a passive virtue, hope an active one. It needs no courage, only a certain naivete to be an optimist. It needs a great deal of courage to have hope. The prophets of Israel were not optimists. When everyone else felt secure, they saw the coming catastrophe. But every one of them was an agent of hope.
Yeah. Yes.
In my opinion, I don't think hope solves the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think the strength and not be afraid
Mm-hmm.
and face the challenge. Thank you.
Yes.
I think this solves the problem.
Yes.
If we are strong,
Yes.
if we are fearless,
Yes.
then we deal with it. If we'll just rely on hope,
Yes.
we know bad things happen.
Good. Perfect. So I'm going to put that into that reaction. I agree. When we think of hope only as a feeling or a dream or words that we use, but it doesn't match up with action and with resolve, it can feel like it has no legs to it. And then it doesn't change the world. But I think sometimes what we're trying to do, so it's really, again, hope can be the operative word here. How do we find the language to say, when we are confronted with a message that says it's over, you have no more options, how do we rediscover our agency? What is it that will teach us, tell us, inspire us to say, I refuse your offer that says it's gone, it's done, and instead, in this case, I think what Rabbi Sacks is trying to say is that optimism is the words, hope is the resolve to stand up and show up, and to believe that action will make a difference. Yeah.
You know, Rabbi Sacks is brilliant, so I'm so glad you quoted him. The second thing he said is, hope is the belief that if we work hard enough, we can make things better. Between them lies the difference, lies all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
In the labor movement, we have a saying, don't mourn, organize.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that really encapsulates what we do, because we're constantly having setbacks.
Yeah.
Constantly. I live in a world of crisis. That's why I like Shabbat.
That's right. And so, right, your world actually is perfectly designed for the quote at the end, which we'll get to, which is, what if we're just always in the end of the world? What if that is a perpetual state of existence? We have choices even in that extreme example, which is to show up, to organize, and to reassert the control and the agency that in so many ways, destruction, devastation, trauma, mourning, and grief takes away from us temporarily. When it takes our breath away and we can't imagine after October 7th, how do we even function in this world? But how do we, using our Jewish tools and our resources and our language, find that sense of agency and resolve again? Yeah.
They say that every Jewish generation thinks it is going to be the second to the last Jewish generation. And God willing, we will continue to persevere and overcome that feeling.
Yes. Yes, I actually do want to jump to this quote really quickly, just off of what Norman said. There's a book called The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. And so she's writing, it's a futuristic book. So she's writing in the voice of her character. But she says, this character is saying, my point is, there's always something. I think as a species, we have a desire to believe that we're living at the climax of the story. It's a kind of narcissism. We want to believe that we're uniquely important and that we're living at the end of history, that now, after all these millennia of false alarms, now is finally the worst that it's ever been, and finally we have reached the end of the world. But all of this raises an interesting question, Olive said. What if it's always the end of the world? And then she paused for effect. Before her, the holographic audience was almost perfectly still. Because we might reasonably think of the end of the world, Olive said, as a continuous and never-ending process. So take what you want in terms of literature, but there is this idea that somehow, no matter how adept we are at studying Jewish history, and we could make a laundry list if we had more time of every moment since Genesis, that we have been at the end of the world, both Torah, rabbinic, crusades, wars, October 7th, I mean, so many moments, and we continue to survive and endure and thrive. So clearly, we're not at the end, except it feels like we are. And maybe there's a lack of certainty over what gets us through, except it feels so deeply Jewish and honest to say, this is what gets us through. We lament, we endure, we find community, we draw on our collective strength. We talk about what gives us a dream beyond this moment, very deeply Jewish. So why do we worry and panic so much? Yes, Matt.
It's interesting. That'd be a better way to do it.
You just need to throw it like a football.
Get to.
Get two.
As you're talking, by the way, I love that novel. I read it like maybe a year ago. I really enjoyed it. About a year ago, I was prepping for my high holiday adjacent sermon, which I talked about Mashiach extensively.
Yes,
which
also a great
right?
coping mechanism.
Right, but similar, right? Because when Norm was saying how every Jewish generation thinks it might be the second to last, I think about what I learned in school, where we were taught that the idea of the Messiah as always not quite yet here, right? So that's like it's sort of two sides of the same coin,
Yep.
right? And so how does that just bubbled up for me?
Yep, that's
and you know, you're talking. It seems like you're leaning into thinking about resources for how to navigate this time, and I look forward to hearing that. And I wonder if there's a piece here of creation and destruction can also be two sides of the same coin. Right? In order for something new to be born, something else needs to fade away, right? That can often be the case. And just as things may be crumbling, right? We also talk about how God creates the world anew each day, and there's always, right? And so that doesn't go to just a Pollyannish, oh, sure, things might be crumbling, but something new will come, but also finding the opportunities for growth, creation,
Yes.
et cetera.
Yeah. And if creation is built in to every day, then I think there's an expectation that also in some way destruction is also built in, right? Otherwise, why are you creating something new if everything was perfect the way it was?
Yeah. The reference to God, God renewing in goodness each day, the act of creation, is coupled, you know, we say that every day, and it's something that for me really keeps me going. And it's coupled with something that I learned from my mentor, Elliot Dorff. And I realized this was over 50 years ago. And it's very hard for me to accept that. And, but he says that Adam shutaf ma'aseh bereshit, that we humans are partners with God in the act of creation. And if we're partners with God in creation, and God renews each day in goodness the act of creation, then we too get the opportunity to renew each day with God. And that's something that for me keeps me going. And it ties in with what, you know, Viktor Frankl says. It's not so much what happens to you, it's how do you respond.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. I was preparing these texts, and then I realized there's also, so as much as we have this claim of maybe sometimes we have been overly hypervigilant or paranoid about it being the end, maybe we misjudge the signs, there is actually one ending that is true and unavoidable, and that would be death. That one we haven't figured out how to escape from. But I thought, and I want to just toss this out as an idea, you'll see that the section next says ethical will, which many of you might be familiar with. But I thought, like, wow, even in how Jews approach death, which is finite, in which we might say, I wish I had more time. I'm not done with the work I want to do in the world. My hands, my heart, my soul, my Torah is going to have a finite end, and I'm not okay with that. I don't want to have to address that. We actually, I think, do something very powerful, which is we create a tradition of ethical wills. So I'm just going to read this out for you. And again, I apologize. This is probably, most of you know this. The first ethical wills are found in the Bible, where Jacob is described gathering his children around his bedside to tell them how they should live after he is gone. The Apocrypha, Talmud, and medieval and modern Jewish literature all contain examples of ethical wills left by parents. And here's the part I thought was interesting. Besides serving to pass on one's values, beliefs, and wishes, an ethical will can also benefit the people who write one. By articulating what you value most in life, reflecting on your personal experiences, and thinking about the decisions you've made, you can learn more about yourself. In this way, an ethical will can be used as a tool for self-reflection and, if you're so inclined, self-improvement. So follow my line of thinking here. So you can see that there is an end that is coming for you, right? It's actually a legitimate end. And how do you deal with that end? While you are still alive, you take the time to think deliberately and intentionally about what is most important to you while you still have time to live and breathe and implement those dreams. And you are deliberate about making sure that the next generation knows what you want and what you hope they will continue on in your name, which I think is a pretty interesting way of saying, how do I deal with the fact that an end is coming? I'm going to find my own agency. I'm going to make sure that the next generation is completely clear about building in my name.
We define what mentorship really is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah.
Go ahead.
You
say more.
defined what mentorship really is. And I think if we all look upon that we learn something in this life, we need to have someone else understand what we learned so they could also use it, you know? So very powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. So flip back to the first page, because I want to, they're out of order, I apologize. Because this is the question now about the Jewish coping technique for fear that the world is coming to an end. To Norm's point, it doesn't usually, but we think it does. And the question of what our agency should be, right? When in danger, preserve your life, fight back. Do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. You're going to defend others. We're not asking to be passive here. But aside from the beautiful verse that says, it's not your duty to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it, Robert Hubble, who's Catholic, but who wrote in a blog recently something that I felt was so intrinsically Jewish, I just wanted to share it with you, reminds me of some of the humility that we also need to have and some of the strength of endurance that we may not in our generation see the outcome that we hope for. But if we hold on, the next generation might. And maybe part of our work in recognizing certain ends and also certain beginnings is understanding the role we play as a link in the chain. So Robert Hubble wrote in his blog post, which I think, again, he's Catholic, but I could take this word for word. First, we must maintain perspective. We are engaged in a long-term battle. The daily wins and losses are less meaningful than the trend over time. Second, we must seek out and join in community with others where we can share our fears and combine our resolve. I already love them. Third, and this is the part I thought was provocative, we must recognize our moral duty to abide and endure. We need not achieve a final victory by a specific date. Indeed, that is impossible. Our role may be to hold back the forces of darkness until the next generation reports for duty. We did the same for generations that preceded us. If that is all we do for the next generation, that will be a noble and sacred sacrifice. But we can accomplish more than holding the line. Indeed, we are doing so every day. We need only to continue in our efforts. And if we can do that, we will repay the debt owed to prior generations and deliver, in this case, he's a political blogger, democracy to the next. But I would say, deliver Torah to the next, deliver Judaism to the next, deliver whatever it is that is most important to you to the next, the thing that feels most under threat. Reactions to the idea that what if one of our responses as Jews to moments of crisis is to figure out what our job is just to hold on? Does that feel weak? Does it feel like we are missing the call? Does it feel like helpful language to say in moments where we're not sure what agency or power we have, holding on is actually incredibly powerful?
Yeah, you said also, I mean, people ask me, I worked with Cesar Chavez for 20 years, what did I learn? I said I learned 3 words, never give up.
Yeah.
And that really is the hope that we have. We're not going to be here to have the world that we want, unless we want a very limited world there. I don't think any of us in this room would be satisfied with that. Yeah, so I agree completely what you wrote.
Thank you. Other reactions? Yeah.
I think for me, it's helpful, in the past. We're referencing October 7th a lot, but, you foregrounded it at the beginning. So depending on the day, week, month, there were definitely moments where it wasn't clear, like, what to do. And I think because for any number of trends, there's, I experience at least oftentimes a desire to, like, quote unquote, do something, right? Get out there and do, like, raise money, political advocacy, all of the things. And a lot of those things are good and holy and important things to do. And there were also moments where it's like, I actually don't know what the thing to do right now is. So in reading this quote, right? So even if it's not the long term, I'm just going to hold on forever, but there are moments, hours, days, weeks where it's okay to say, you know what? All I can do right now is just hang in there.
Yeah.
And that's significant, right? So it seems like he's speaking to that. And I appreciate that a lot. I really like that.
I mean, I think a lot about reactions also just in times where the levels of anti-Semitism have been skyrocketing for years now, and I feel like the Jews at Isaiah are often like, what are we going to do, Rabbi? You must get that too, right? What are we going to do? And sometimes the thing that brings them the most comfort is just gathering for all of the normal rituals and Jewish time and Jewish calendar, and it's not actually doing more. Well, for some of them, actually, it is more than they've done for many years. But it's like, oh, Shabbat. It turns out that actually helps me feel like I can get back up and do the work I need to do this week. Or not just Shabbat, but even like Hanukkah took on new meaning this year with the candles and we've had Hanukkah since 163 BCE, like 165, whatever it was. Like we've had it for a long time, but in using what we already have held on to in each and every generation where we are worried about this catastrophe, some of these resources that seem so ordinary and so commonplace and so familiar actually become some of the most miraculous, extraordinary rituals, words, opportunities to gather. So I think sometimes about, like, there's a part of me that wants to give a High Holy Day sermon that is like, let's just go back to being Jews, which feels like, because it seems so small, but if you redouble your efforts to participate in Jewish community, to study a little Torah, all of what you know, it has the roots that you need to be planted in something that feels much more aspirational and hopeful than if you plant your roots in social media or if you spend all your time agonizing over the media headlines. So I think, again, this should not feel like new to anyone, but I think part of it is trying to post Tisha B'Av, think about how we really need these resources and these tools presented back to us every day, because the world does feel incredibly vulnerable and precarious and unstable. Yehuda Kurtzer gave a lecture this summer where he said, like, only the Jews would think with their commitment to Tikkun Olam that like 0.2% of the population is responsible for healing the entire world. Like, we are so chutzpahdik in our, like, we can do it all. And sometimes that's what overwhelms us. But when we focus back in, maybe we start with our foundation again. And then from there, we find we have the strength, just like Adam and Eve found one another in the dark, to endure and wait till the sun rises again. So thank you for letting me teach and think out loud with you. Shabbat Shalom.